Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's session. Those of you who've been with us for a few minutes will be obviously suitably impressed that I had a typo in the opening screen, so you would have seen it vanish and reappear. It's amazing, however much preparation you do on these things, there's always some last minute thing I find. So welcome to today's session. I'm going to just launch straight in. I'm Guy Osmond, I'm from Osmond Ergonomics, and today's topic, as you see, is hybrid working. What is everybody else doing? And it's nice to see you've had a big take up on this. So it's obviously an interesting topic for lots of people in lots of different professions and parts of the workplace. So just for a bit of housekeeping to start with, I noticed that on one of our pages, I noticed last night, it says our webinars are all 30 minutes. I've got a lot to cover here today, so I'm not sure if I'll do it in 30. I'll do my best, but it may drift on. And those of you who know me will know I have a habit of going off on all sorts of tangents, and that too may happen. If it does, we are recording this session today. So if there's anything that you're not able to stay right through for, then by all means, I fully understand, and you will get a link to the recording in due course after the event. I'm here at home on my own today, so I will endeavour to keep up with questions. I'll be keeping an eye in between times on the Q&A, but if I do miss anything or we run out of time, I will come back to all the questions after the event. Although I'm off on holiday tomorrow for a few days, so it may take a week to get back to you. The whole slide deck is already uploaded, probably at this moment complete with the first page typo. So you will get an email tomorrow asking for feedback, but also with a link to the PDF of the slide deck. And then the video probably will be ready in about a week after that, and we'll follow it on. There are lots and lots of links in this presentation. So when you get the PDF, you'll be able to follow up on several of the things I'm sure you'll want to explore further. And obviously, if you want to follow up with me or with any of my colleagues, we'd be very happy to do so. So this is today's agenda. I'm not going to go through it in one-by-one detail because I'm going to talk about all those things in just a moment. So as you will appreciate, that is quite a lot. It is a big topic. I suspect that all of you have experience at some level at the various stages of this, looking at what we're going to be doing at the post-pandemic. But hopefully I'll give you some insights from people, professions you may not have come across, people you may not have heard of, research you may not have seen. And the idea today is present you with some other ideas maybe you haven't thought of, but also hopefully some reassurance that at least you're going about it the right way. So to give it some context, I'm going to be talking about my own experience and my own observations. I don't pretend to be any authority on this enormous topic. Obviously, I have a lot of views related to it, but equally, I'm sure many of you are in roles within your own organizations where you have enormous knowledge and experience, but probably very specifically to that role that you're in and that organization you're in. So what I'm hoping to do is to give you a broader view, give you some insights into what researchers are saying, what presenters are saying, what other organizations are doing, and see how that might be useful to you to know in your own progression through this. So as I say, I don't pretend to be any particular expert, although it is a fascinating topic. I've been following a lot. I've been listening to lots of people on presentations at seminars, webinars, conferences, several virtual conferences, picking stuff up. I'm very much hoping that this is going to be one of those standing on the shoulders of giants presentation where I give you some great ideas, I hope, but probably not that many of them will be mine, but I will be attributing everything, so I'm not laying claim to too much of this. So there will be, as I've also mentioned on the screen here, that I will be covering, I've done a lot of screen grabs. I'm not using them in this, actually one, but I've been doing a lot of screen grabs from the various presentations I've been attending and using those as a basis for evolving my own thinking. And I have to say my own thinking has evolved during the process of creating this presentation. And in fact, I've even added some more stuff this morning. Really interesting email just came in about 10 o'clock this morning. So I've had a little rejig even today. As I mentioned already, I'll try and pick up on Q&A as I can, but obviously because I'm the only one here, it may be a bit of a struggle to keep them going. But by all means, throw in any Q&A questions through the option within Zoom, and I'll get to them, if not now, then later on in the day. So let's get straight into a poll. I'd forgotten this was going to be the first thing, just to get some idea about my audience. I'm launching this now, except that says it's poll 3, I beg your pardon. Let's go with poll 1. So just to get some idea about where everybody is in the audience today with the plans as they stand at the moment. This is all anonymous. I've got 3 polls today. Each of them is anonymous. So just to get an idea about my audience. So hopefully you can see that. I'll just wait a moment longer. Okay, so I'm going to stop polling now because I don't want to spend too much time on these, but it is useful to get an insight. And if I now share these results with you, as you can see, nobody's got it all agreed and in place, and everybody's sitting in the well advanced but not quite yet there yet, or still working on it. Pleased to see nobody's trying not to think about it. I think that's pretty impossible to do. That was a bit tongue-in-cheek, obviously, but so we're roughly half and half, well advanced and still working on it. So that's quite useful for me to see where we are. So thank you for that. So moving on then again. So the spoiler alert is obviously there is no silver bullet for this. If you are hoping to attend this event and go away with a template that just filled in a load of tick boxes and you'd have all the answers, then it's not going to be anything like that. This is going to be a big disappointment, I'm afraid. But obviously, as we all know, just using the principles of ergonomics, that everybody's an individual. We're not just all different shapes and sizes, but we're different personalities and characters and so forth. So, and organizationally, obviously organizations have those different characters and so forth. So I'm going to suggest a number of simple templates or concepts that people are tending to fall into, but not really. Everything must be specific to your own organization. And ultimately, I put up a few pointers here about what sort of things that I think are crucial. Culture, obviously, what is the culture of your business and how is it operating? What sort of people do you have in it? What are their personalities? How big's the business? What sort of business are you in? Is it a very traditional business? Is it much more sort of high-tech, modern? Demographics of your people, what sort of ages? Again, have you got mainly extroverts, lots of introverts? What sort of different character types? All of those things will impact on how you need to address this. And I very much hope that whatever you are doing, you're seeking staff views all the way along the way to get an idea of what they're looking for and what their expectations are out of that as well. Didn't mention geography. Obviously, how widely spread your people are will be significant. Some people may have actually moved away from the office during lockdown. We're hearing quite a lot of that, particularly big cities, London in particular, people moving away to lower cost, bigger houses further away from London. Obviously, that's going to impact their willingness to travel to work and so forth. And tying the geography and the culture, we've seen even in response to COVID, very much different responses from different countries. So culturally, countries are different, as we well know. And so that will also impact what sort of response. There will be some who are culturally very happy to get back to a central office, others much more happy with a dispersed scenario. So to get straight into some research, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Leesman Index. I regard it as probably the de facto best place to go in terms of finding this sort of research. I'm not a Leesman practitioner or anything, so I'm just going from the data. I've seen a number of presentations over the last 15 months by Tim Oldman and Peggy Rotha, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, from Leesman about their research. And I just thought it'd be useful to look at two variants on this of the data they've got. So back in, and you may or may not be able to see this on your screen, but this was data as at the 26th of August 2020, and it was just over 126, or almost 127,000 home worker responses and nearly 750,000 office worker responses. So going back to August last year, the data they had showed that the percentage of people answering whether they felt productive, nearly 20% of, the number of people who said they were more productive at home was nearly 20% more than the people who thought they were productive at work, at the office. So that's a really significant number. And obviously, not only is there nearly 20% difference in the results, but also over 80%, more than 4/5 of the workforce. And this is, again, a global index. It's data from all over the world. I think totally the whole index, I think it's around about 90 countries. So this is a lot of people expressing a view. So significant data there. Now, if we move on and then look at some more specific, and now this is the LMI and the HLMI, which is the Leesman Index and the Home Leesman Index. Some of you may or may not be familiar with this. I'm not going to go into detail of it. As I say, I'm not a practitioner, but I understand it pretty well. You will see at the bottom of the screen, there is a link to the Leesman website, which will give you much more information about this. Many of you probably are Leesman, use the Leesman Index to get your own feedback long before COVID about employee engagement and job satisfaction and all the other elements that it picks up on. So this is really interesting, I think, because it looks, this was the first time I saw data, this was in Q3 of 2020, that looked specifically at the differences between people who had a room, an office or a study to work in at home, those who didn't have a separate room but did have a dedicated area. So basically something they could work at and then walk away from at the end of the day, maybe in a corner of a dining room or sitting room or whatever. And then the people with a non-specific home working location. So those who at the end of the day need to clear it up and put it away, or worse still, leave it all out so you never quite get away from work. And then you go from the scenario, which people have termed, rather than working from home, living at work. And so you see this data is very different. So those with a dedicated, and if we look at the blue is the HLMI, so that's home worker response. The white or gray is the LMI, which is office response. So those working at home with a dedicated room, study, office, whatever it was, 8% higher satisfaction. And you're looking at overall productivity figures that are generally pretty high. So you're looking at organizations where the productivity at the office is already pretty good. So dedicated home office, 8% difference. That shuts down significantly to less than 3% difference between those, for those who have a dedicated work area but not a separate room, and goes completely the other way to those with a non-specific home location. So those back in August, and we're now in this case for home workers specifically up to 145,000 responses. So by this time, we're looking at people saying that actually working at home in a non-dedicated area and actually sharing with the rest of the house, and probably the home with homeschooling and all manner of other considerations, people sharing with other workers, with spouses who are also trying to work at home, the numbers change quite significantly, excuse me. So we've seen that home working has worked very well, but what we need to keep in mind is it's worked very well in some cases, quite a lot of cases, but it doesn't suit everybody. And so this model you've probably seen before, my sort of Venn diagram of the different types of environment that people encounter and what impacts how well they like and respond and are productive in any given environment. It was originally, the context was for the workplace, but obviously it worked reasonably well for the domestic situation as well. So the physical environment is obviously a key thing, and people at home probably are more comfortable in their own domestic situation. Technology is a big deal. So a lot of organizations, when they first moved to home working, the biggest problem was actually getting the IT to work, getting people to have proper Wi-Fi, proper broadband, sufficient bandwidth, providing them with laptops. There were desperate shortages of laptops when the first lockdown began. And indeed, actually, laptop prices are still high and have remained high since the start of COVID. And then obviously you've got your cultural environment. I mentioned the culture of the business and the organization earlier on, and how important this is, and whatever that culture is. And obviously different businesses are, as I say, very different. You might be a very traditional old school business, or you might be a new starter IT business where the vibrancy, the nature, the communication methods, how people interact, very different. So those three types of environment impact what people experience as their overall feel about the business they're in, the organization, and the workplace where they work. And indeed, and I've gone blank on his name, I'm sorry, but one of the guys that I've heard speak many times, I'm completely blank, I apologize for that. He's talked about workplace being workspace plus culture. And we know that if you actually, if offices are occupied and then the tenant leaves and somebody else comes in, they could leave it exactly how it is, but will interact in very different ways in the same setting, depending on the culture of the business or the organization. So I like that idea that workplace equals workspace plus culture. So those three areas, environments, impact how people respond wherever they are. And that's important to keep in mind if you're thinking of bringing people back into the office, about how they will interact, not only with their colleagues, but actually with their environment as well. So I was going to do sort of pros and cons of home working and office working. And then I thought, well, really the pros are one and the cons are the other. So I thought this could just as easily have been pros and cons of office working and just reversed. But the things that have really come out from this rush to home working that was necessitated was lots and lots of people are saying better work-life balance. I, for example, not every day, but nearly every day, stop for lunch and actually do the Times quiz with my wife nearly every day. I never previously stopped at all in the office, and that's been something, other than the fact that she's about 98% of wins to 2% of mine, which I'm still working on, and I hope one day I'll catch up on the scoring with it. But that's particularly a very different change of us for me at home. And I used to be in the office often until 7-ish at night. Now, I have to admit, I do go back to work at sometimes in the evenings, but I actually do finish quite early so that we can get out and get a walk or get some exercise while the weather's, while it's daylight. So that's a particularly significant thing for me and for many, many people I know. Probably the majority of people would say the most useful thing has been their better work-life balance. Obviously, there's less travel. And that means that people, there's an environmental impact, and there's another spelling mistake. I'm sorry, I've just spotted. Better for the environment. I know how it should be spelled. I'm sorry, I didn't do so there. And my spell check didn't pick it up. But obviously less travel, that means less used time on traveling. I know a lot of people actually now, one of the ideas I've come across is people actually go for a walk or take the dog out or whatever it is they do gym exercises for the length of time they would normally travel, so that actually their traveling time that they always had and always used, they're now able to use in a more healthy way. But the other thing we've seen from the data you've just seen, but actually from general anecdotal conversations that we've had, is that people have found it much easier to focus at home. And they've also, and probably as a result of that, had increased productivity. So that's that productivity thing, much of it has come from the focus. And I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. So the cons, of course, and here's one of my two of my favorite words, serendipitous and osmosis. So lots of serendipitous meetings, and that's become a really big deal. Those chats that you have with colleagues may be about work, maybe nothing to do with work, that people are really missing out on. Whether that's in the car park as you arrive or leave in the morning or the evening, whether it's in the corridor, whether it's in the coffee, by the coffee machine, those water cooler moments, of course, those meetings that people are really missing out on, because pretty much every meeting that people now have is actually scheduled. It's a Zoom or a Teams or a Google, whatever it is you use as your technology. Everything is in the diary. And often, and this is something that also crops up a lot, there's more or less no gap between anything. So people have an hour and they're straight into the next one. In fact, I had a Zoom this morning with somebody in Turkey and somebody in Hungary, both of whom were late on. In fact, I thought they'd forgotten the meeting, but both of them had been delayed by their previous session. So we're not getting those just by chance, the serendipitous things that are really important. And more recently, I've heard of this, but it's become quite a common thing to be discussed now, is that learning by osmosis, the stuff that younger people, newer people into the business, less experienced people, the things you just pick up as you go along from the other people who are there, your work colleagues. There's a lot of that being missed. And like the serendipitous meetings, like those situations which happen by chance, it's quite difficult to replicate or replace that stuff that people learn by accident just because they overhear conversations or are party to discussions. And not only is it quite difficult, one of the reasons it's quite difficult to replace is actually we're unaware it's happening when it does. So that's a really significant consideration. So possibly linked to those things, but actually also linked to the lack of interaction. A lot of organizations talking about loss of creativity. And creativity, we often think that's all about sort of design and marketing, but actually all of us are creative. I'm not altogether sure we want to own up to being a creative accountant, because that's got a slightly inappropriate a connotation, but we're engineers are creative. Everybody we work with, we're all creative in our daily life. But a lot of that creativity comes from sparks from other people as we're in conversation. I mentioned that a lot of people are finding that whilst there are those who can say, right, I'm working my normal hours and then I'm just going to get out on the bike or go for a walk or go to the gym when I would be just sitting in the car, on the bus or the tube, they're able to do that. There are lots more who are finding they're just filling out their time with working longer hours. And obviously, we've heard a lot about mental health issues. There's a lot of awareness about that, all really good progress in terms of making people more aware. We've recently had Stress Awareness Week, Stress Awareness Month and Mental Health Awareness Week, or vice versa. And people, organizations are just constantly thinking and talking about that. But the physical health issues are also something that I think aren't getting enough attention. I'm going to come back to this, but certainly our observations, again, it's only anecdotal at the moment. We don't really have research on it, but we are categorically talking to people with musculoskeletal problems who've never had them before. So this is not people who had backache in the office, who've got backache at home. These are people who are getting complaints that they've never had before. And I think those numbers are growing. And again, it's only anecdotal, it's my gut feel, but I think there's not enough attention being paid. I don't want to demean the mental health at all. That's absolutely important as it is, but the physical health, I think by many organizations, is not being given the attention it needs or deserves. And indeed, we're certainly getting the feeling now that we're actually starting to recognize we're getting more and more assessment requests coming in. But this goes right back practically from the beginning of lockdown. We were getting people complaining of neck and shoulder complaints, and ask any physio or chiropractor, osteopath or physician probably, if somebody says, I'm working at home, I've got neck and back pain, the first question is, are you using a dining table or the kitchen table? And the answer is almost always yes. And the answer very often means that they are sitting at a table that typically, I researched this the other day, if you go into that big Scandinavian furniture store, nearly all of their dining tables are 75 centimeters high. UK desks are 74 centimeters or lower, and dining chairs typically sit lower than you would use an office desk. So the combination of lower seat, higher table inevitably means you're going to get hunching problems. So that's been a very common thing, but that's continuing to come through, and we're now getting other problems we're seeing as well. So let's do another little poll just to see where we're going. I'm going to now do, stop sharing these results and go to workplace settings and launch this poll. This is just to ask, what are your current workplace circumstances? So just a couple of minutes to deal with this one. Just another 5 seconds. Well, that's a good proportion of those taking part anyway, so I'm going to share the results. And I did just notice that the last poll, I hadn't clicked stop sharing results. So I very much hope you haven't had my poll sitting in the middle of all the screens all the way through. If you have, and now I've seen no chat or question, so fingers crossed you didn't. If you did, I'm really sorry, and I will re-record this for the video that is made available later, but I'm hoping not. But I will remember to stop sharing results for the next one, so fingers crossed. So what we can see is obviously nearly 90%, sorry, over 90% of the attendees today are actually working from home, either most or full time. So the return to the office, very small proportion still. So that's really useful. And thank you for that. And I'm now going to definitely stop sharing these results. So hopefully that is definitely now out of your way. So moving on then. And so this picks up on that concentration issue. So we've been talking for a number of years about the 4 C's of collaboration, communication, concentration, and contemplation. And what we've seen is that as I've mentioned already, the concentration and contemplation part work really well when you're home working. And so that's, I think, a lot of the reason why home working has been so well received, that people have been able to just get on with the job, particularly project stuff, particularly demanding stuff, particularly things they really need to think about. And, you know, not to demean the fact they probably can get up and go for a quick walk if they need to clear their head or stretch their legs as well in the middle of that. And so people are talking now about the need to bring people back in more for the collaboration and communication. Although, as I'll say shortly, that actually there will be a need to provide concentration and contemplation space as well. But the thing people have missed, those serendipitous moments, those opportunities to talk to colleagues, the osmosis learning, that's what comes out of the collaboration and communication issues. And that's what we have missed out on working from home, because you just can't replicate it with a scheduled Zoom or Teams meeting. And so creativity, I mentioned, I'm adding that now in presentations and conversations. That's our 5th C. I've mentioned that people are saying creativity is being missed out. And certainly there's strong evidence from a number of organizations. And again, a lot of anecdotal stuff, no research as such, because it's quite difficult to quantify. But it does certainly look like there's a lot of people a lot of organizations are missing out on creativity because of those people sparking with one another and kicking ideas around and brainstorming. That's just not happening. So the collaboration and communication are the areas that organizations generally are looking at carefully for when they bring people back. So now this is a model from David Davis of Hassel Studio. He's a New York-based architectural and workplace practice he's involved in, and I attended his presentation of these 5 models at the Workplace Trends Conference a couple of weeks ago, which incidentally was really good. So if you're not familiar with workplace trends, do take a look at it, because the one last month was, or the beginning of this month, was all about research, and so it was some really interesting stuff. So David's research came up with these 5 models. Now, there are variants of these, and obviously there are others, but they found from their research, both of clients and of non-clients that these were the 5 most common scenarios. So obviously the first one, and this is scenarios for people to return to work and what they're considering. And so on the left, we've got as it was, obviously people just saying, well, COVID's over, let's just go back to doing what we always did. Very much in person, in the workplace as before. And at the other extreme on the right, no office, the virtual workplace, most commonly reported by startup businesses or small businesses or fast growth businesses where they've never, or even business, a lot of them have never had an office, so why start one now? And then in between, we've got 3 other sort of variations. So I think I'm going to start in the middle and work out. So the clubhouse, I would typically associate as a Google type office. People talk about a Google type office. So I think that's an idea, an expression people be very familiar with. The idea is that at the center of the business, people are still able to work away and in various other locations, but at the center of the business is an office which is like a clubhouse. As well as facilitating work, it very much facilitates and in fact makes it a big part of what it's there for, the social activity. Now, I'm not saying the socialization, the social activity and the socialization. So I'm not saying that everybody is going to have a wellness spa and a swimming pool and a hospitality area and a bar and a restaurant and everything else. Many will perhaps, but that's the sort of idea that you create a place where people can come to work in various different ways, but also you create a place that's particularly designed to actually encourage the socialization, to actually trigger the creative moment, those creative opportunities, those serendipitous meetings. Actually, that's central to the whole rationale behind it. We then move to hub and spoke. You'll understand the concept of that. And the one I use typically, I think is probably, to my knowledge, the best representation of this is Nationwide. And you're probably aware, UK people, participants today, delegates, that Nationwide, the Building Science Society Bank, has said that it is actually providing a facility for people to work. They're reducing their office space. They're providing the provision for people to work at home if they want to, but also they are looking at how they might facilitate people coming into local branches. So this type of concept either will work only with organizations where they do have lots of individual branches around the country, or they've got a number of offices or whatever they might be considering that they might use, or perhaps third space. And I haven't mentioned third space yet, so I'll bring it in now. By third space, I mean things like WeWork, they're widely known as hubs. So those places where you can go and rent space by the hour or the half day or the day or the week or the month. There's a number of them around, and there will be growing numbers, and I think taking a lot more different varieties. I hope to see a few of the pubs that have closed down reopen as a different type of community centre, offering good Wi-Fi, good coffee, and a suitable environments for people to hold their Zoom calls or to have chats with people who work locally. So the hub and spoke concept basically means people are able to work from home or to go somewhere quite close to home. You know, this goes towards almost the idea of everybody can walk to work, which is a whole separate topic I'm not going to get into today. But if you're interested in that, there was another speaker at Workplace Trends I can direct you to. Interestingly, David said that he found that the hub and spoke model, they couldn't find a hub and spoke model that people were getting excited about for how it was working, but they did find a handful of organizations working currently hub and spoke and looking to migrate away from it. So if you're looking at hub and spoke, by all means get back to me. I don't know that much about this, but I happily put you in touch with David if you want to say, oh, we're on the right track here. And then the final one, turbocharged ABW. So activity-based working has been well established, particularly well established in Australia, where David had done a lot of the Hassel research. But the idea of activity-based working, very much part of the concept of agile working or smart working, two terms widely used before COVID. And a lot of what we're talking about here is, whatever your term, agile working or smart working. The concept of providing different scenarios according to what people are doing. So making the scenario, the setting, the place they work suitable for the activity they're doing. So that could be at home, it could be the office, or it could be a third space. And so the idea, the reason they said it was turbocharged, or they've described it as turbocharged rather than just traditional activity-based working, what they saw in this cohort of organizations was actually that they were looking to turbocharge the desk ratios. So historically, certainly in the UK, we were finding that organizations already doing agile working, and I'm going to carry on telling it that rather than keep referring to smart working as well, were typically doing 7 or 8 desks in the office per 10 people. In the turbocharged ABW environments, they were finding that agile working organizations were looking at 6 or even 5 desks. So creating other space for people to do different types of things, but actually physical desks for people to do traditionally what you would see as desk-based work. They were reducing the numbers in that work environment. So I thought David's stuff was particularly useful. There is a video of his presentation, which was about 22 minutes. I don't think I can share it with you because it's password protected from Workplace Trends from the, obviously it was their conference. But I'm happy if anybody particularly wants to explore this further, do please get back to me afterwards and I'll see if I can find a way either to introduce you to David or to give you some more information from his his presentation. So I'm just going to do another poll, just the last one of the session. Just hopefully I've explained that sufficiently well. So I would love to know what you think is likely to be the way your organization will go. And if you're not sure yet, then do by all means just put undecided. So this is a really interesting mix. And what I should have had was as a supplementary question is whether those looking at as it was or turbocharged activity-based working were already doing some sort of activity-based working before. So yes, so an interesting mix, as you can see. And having said, be wary of hub and spoke, nearly half of you are with organizations where hub and spoke is being seriously considered. David made various other points, which I'm not going to go into now, which may or may not be relevant for wherever you're based. But by all means, if you want to pick up with me on that, 'cause it's quite a high proportion of people, I'm just going to close the polling now. But if you want to discuss that further, and it may be the way he described hub and spoke and the way I've interpreted is different from how you're thinking. So it may be you already have a number of regional offices anyway, and that's how you're looking to do it, where you're actually just going to reduce the head office size and have more people working from existing smaller buildings. So that may be a different variant. So interesting, nobody's doing the health spa with the swimming pool and free accommodation and meals and everything else. So obviously we haven't got anybody on from Google today. So thank you very much for that. I will make these polls available to everybody in due course, and I will, and I just realized I didn't share the results. Sorry, I'm not very good with these polls. I'm sorry. Let's just show you again. So I am now sharing the results. I went to stop sharing them and realized I hadn't them. So I apologize for commenting on them when you couldn't see them. I promise to improve at this bit. Polls are comparatively new to me, although I've been Zooming for years. Well, certainly a good 18 months. But as you can see, just to pick up that hub and spoke is looking nearly half at the most common. So interesting stuff. So I'm now going to remove this, and then I think we're good to get going again. So, and then I also want to pick up on, this is from a different perspective. Again, this is Stephanie Akoi-Hughes, who's a Dutch architect, and I've attended a couple of really interesting presentations from her. Her perspective as an architect is that we used to all be working in one box on the left, And now we're going to what she calls the work net, where you have all these different nodes within your communications methodology and the people you interact with and your social and work circles. And we need to facilitate that, because her description is that interactions are what spark creativity. So her thinking as an architect is actually as that the workplace, however that is defined and whatever you provide, should actually be a catalyst for those interactions. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, organizations, when they're looking at design and so forth, are looking at how might they be able to create that opportunity. So I'm not going to spend long on that because it's a much bigger topic. Again, I provided a link. She does have a book about her topic, and there's a lot of stuff on their website, which will be, I'm sure you'll find useful if you're interested. So I thought, now let's just look at some sort of ideas about the way things are starting to go. They were already going that way in many ways before. Before I just sort of do some pointing at a few illustrations of different type of activity. This relationship buildings is a new book. It's got data from April, so it's very recent, from Orange Box, a furniture manufacturer. But as many of you will know, they do a lot of outside research. They employ postgrad recruiters on their payroll on a regular rotating basis. But Jerry, can't remember his surname, who usually instigates and sort of manages these sort of lateral thinking type thing, has come up with the idea of need to stop talking about office buildings and start thinking about relationship buildings. So that goes right back to that whole thing I was talking about earlier about interaction and, well, just a moment, interaction, but about communication, collaboration. So when you get the presentation, this links through to a PDF. You can download the whole book, which, as with all Orange publications, it's a great read. It's full of lots of graphics, lots of images. It's not heavy condensed text. It's somebody as superficial as me, I have to say, it's great. Those of you who want to dig deeper will also find a lot in it. So it's a useful document. I haven't read it all completely. As I say, it's only just been out. I only just very recently found out about it. But collaboration in situations very much appearing everywhere. This sort of storage wall made of shelving, open shelving, cube sort of base stuff, which can be really helps your biophilia content, really came back hand in hand with lots of plants appearing more and more as we understood more about biophilia in the workplace. This, people going for quite funky designs. This just bare plywood almost looks like you have to show up with a saw in the morning yourself and create your own work area, but very different ideas. More and more areas also looking like domestic settings. So furniture, sofas in particular, looking at a sort of thing you might find or even want to buy for home. And certainly breakout interaction areas. All these areas tending to be much more variety these days, much more open places that people can sit and interact, maybe do a bit of laptop work, although obviously from an ergonomics background, we wouldn't encourage too much sitting in this, but these are very much designed for touchdown areas, move around. And I will comment, for those of you who know the sort of products we sell, this is not a picture of something we supplied that. I think £29.99 Chinese chair that they're using there, certainly not something that came from us. So these are just a few examples of the sort of things people are now doing, actually very much reduce your traditional desk space, but give a real variety, find out what sort of interactions people are doing, find out what sort of activities they need to support, and supply suitable environments for that. Keep in mind, though, that actually not everybody who's coming into the workplace is coming just for the communication and collaboration. There will be all those people who are sharing space, are very much extrovert and need to interact. There's all sorts of reasons why, but are hating home working and will want to get back in the office as soon as possible. But they will also need quiet areas where they can do work. So things like telephone boxes that were already well established before COVID, my expectation, well, all the indications already will become much more commonplace. So environments where there's a lot of open space, and a lot of smaller, a real mix, maybe replacing meeting rooms, traditional meeting rooms, with this more sort of casual type, almost living room type space. And in fact, and I've got to remember which it is, I'm pretty certain it was Auto Trader, not Autocar, the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors, another of the conferences I attended recently. The facilities manager from Auto Trader was talking about how they had moved from a print business completely online and moved everybody out. Their boardroom pretty much looks like somebody's domestic sitting room. So a lot of organizations are now starting to go to that sort of area where the provision, even the meeting areas, don't really look like meeting areas. So different heights, different spaces, different levels of comfort. If you want people to just touch down for short periods, it's quite easy to make something not too comfortable, which will encourage them to move on. May need some policing, depending on, again, how your culture is. But the other thing I wanted to pick up on, two things here. Biophilia, which I assume probably most of you are familiar with, but I'll mention again, our natural affinity to the natural world, the reason we feel better when we go outside, the reason it's not just exercise, but the fresh air, the surroundings, the fact that if you ask somebody to close their eyes and think of their favorite place, it will almost certainly be somewhere with woodland or streams or the sea or a beach or mountains, those sort of things. Those are the places where we relate most with nature. And biophilia is a concept of bringing that inside. So you will see everywhere you look now in offices, and if you're not already thinking about that, you definitely should be. There are plants everywhere. Don't have to be real plants. You can actually do artificial plants, even pictures of the natural world. I'll show you right at the end something we've done in our own offices that you can actually just make sure people feel in touch with nature. So the second thing I wanted to mention is acoustics. And that's something that historically, it's one of the things that I think we've neglected in the workplace. It's a topic that has been quite hard to raise with organizations until they really understand what the benefits can be, because it seems like a bit of an inexact science to a lot of people, because it's quite difficult to sort of understand how it works. But you can see here we've got sort of felt drop-down unit. Obviously, you get the acoustic benefits of telephone boxes. Here we've got absorbent pads in the back of the wall. And a lot of people also are doing carpets that actually incorporate some sort of acoustic benefit. Plants obviously help with the benefit, anything that breaks things up. Moving away from the traditional look, which certainly city offices have been, which is basically glass, steel, and concrete, which are not good sound absorbers. They all reflect sound, and obviously any unwanted sound, that's a definition of noise. So something that's come out of feedback from people working from home, obviously those with homeschooling and sharing with lots of people, not so good from them. But for others, being able to get rid of noise, unwanted sound, by shutting the door, maybe playing some music in the background, or even I know people who actually play the sound. There are free websites you can just download and play office background noise, so you just have the sound behind you like it would be in the office. So all of these things are important to consider when you're looking about bringing people back to the office. And my thinking is that actually, and you can certainly see it here, that in the bottom right picture, that offices, I think, will start to look more like, it was happening already, but more like hotel lobbies, but even more like pubs and restaurants. And I think there's real potential for those who've been having a quiet time in the hospitality industry to be looking at repurposing some of the pubs, as I said earlier, into local community hubs with coffee, maybe alcohol from later in the day, but breakout areas, touchdown areas, meeting areas, brilliant Wi-Fi, excellent coffee. Those are the two things that are absolutely essential. But also these hospitality interior designers looking at what sort of thing you're going to do in the office, because you may have heard the term the magnetic office. We're all talking now about how do we create a workplace that actually attracts people back. We need them to want to come to the workplace. And as Tim Oldman of Leesman said in one of his presentations, probably a year ago now, if we look at how many people think they're more productive at home, a place that was never designed for them to work, then what on earth have we all been doing? Architects, designers, workplace designers, furniture providers, all of those things. What have we been doing to design our workplace now before? So this is the time to really step back and think about what sort of ideas you need to incorporate into the place to actually benefit everybody that you've got coming in, and to suit all of their needs and all of their personality and fit the culture of your organization. So coming back as I start to wind up, sorry, it's nearly an hour as it's turned out. I said it was a lot, so thank you for staying with me, those who have. Just back to obviously what you know us for, and I suppose our little bit of a plug, although we can help you with any of the stuff I've been talking about. Many of you will know us very much for dealing with individual needs. Don't forget, when you're looking at all this, to just look back and see what have you been doing so far in the last 15 months? How well have you been looking after your home workers? We know there's been a lot of concentration and focus on mental health, mental well-being, providing support and help for that. What we have seen certainly is a reduction of attention to physical health. So we're seeing, as I mentioned, anecdotal evidence, actually clear evidence of increases in musculoskeletal problems. We are realizing and recognizing that many employers have sort of dropped their assessment process or slowed it down or turned it into a sort of major escalation only process, or maybe saying if they got a backache, we'll send them a chair and see if the problem goes away. But keep in mind, there's a lot of things we're seeing now as we're coming out of COVID, although there's a lot of buoyancy and enthusiasm that finally we can hopefully get our lives back, although there may be another lockdown coming. But there's a lot of people concerned about job security, about the nature of work and everything else at the moment. So I think we're also got, and again, this is only a personal view, no evidence of it, but I think it's highly likely, we're also seeing what we saw in the 2008-9 recession, which is people who've got problems, but they're not saying anything because they don't want to raise their head above the parapet. So to use another of my favorite words, I think we could be seeing a tsunami of musculoskeletal problems. I think there's a backlog, and hopefully many of you will agree. I know we've got a number of ergonomists and physios on this at the moment. We'll probably be thinking that actually, yes, there are people who haven't been getting the attention, and that needs to be done. So whether it's through your existing online facility, whether it's through a supplier like ourselves, or whether you introduce something else different, you need to be making sure your DSE type assessment process, your risk assessment process, however you do it, is not just applicable to office. It is being rolled out with home workers as well, and it's being kept up to date and monitored, and so that everybody obviously has the right equipment they need to improve their posture and productivity and reduce their pain and discomfort. And as I say, shameless plug, obviously, if you need help with any of that, I know a company who's pretty good at it. So just carrying on, and I want to just leave this actually as we sort of get pretty much to the end, that this came through, I mentioned one came today. This came from Lucy Adams. Lucy used to be the HR director or director of personnel at BBC. She now runs her own practice called Disruptive HR. And the stuff she sends is fabulous. And again, there's a link, really useful, out of the box thinking, different ideas. The two particular comments she made in today's thing, and there's a little video about what's the new normal and so forth. When you're looking at what you're going to do, and we're seeing this with organizations across the piece, that actually don't overcomplicate it. Try not to put too many rules in. One of the things people have loved about getting on with their life at home is they haven't been bound by thousands of procedures and processes and authorities and permissions. I'm not saying you don't need to have due control of your business, but actually, as you're getting this opportunity to review everything, we certainly did it. When we went into the first lockdown, I had lots of staff on furlough. It's basically myself and a handful of managers. We looked at everything we did because we were seeing things we as managers had not looked at for ages. And so we were literally saying, why do we do this? Is this really necessary? And often the only answer to the question, why do we do this, was, well, we always have for as long as anybody can remember. So keep it simple, try and keep that as a focus. Don't start bringing in a load more, reintroducing loads of rules and procedures. Manage locally. Don't assume as a multinational you can roll out something from head office globally, or just as significantly as a national company, or even a regional company with different types of branches, different types of demographics. Let your local people, they're intelligent people, trust them. This is one of Lucy's thing. Trust people, don't treat them like children by giving them loads of rules. Trust people to do it right. And actually there will be one or two, but don't set the rules to deal with the misdemeanors. Set it for the vast majority who will be educated, intelligent, responsible people. And to sum it up with her words, let's not return to normal, let's create something better. So there are no questions at the moment. I was just finally going to mention that picture of me is really not so that you have to look at me, I apologize for that, but to point out that picture was taken in the office. And going back to the biophilia, we've got the whole of one complete wall, which is 6.5 meters long by 2.5 meters high, that is one enormous woodland scene, and seen at everybody who comes into the building and sees it absolutely loves it. So as I say, biophilia doesn't have to be about real live plants. It can be about anything at all. I'm going to switch off the recording. If anybody has any questions,